Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about juniors and being depressed. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, what do you do if a junior developer is depressed and is being treated badly by senior developers due to that they're not so good at implementations and tough logic? Well, in that scenario, it depends a little bit it depends on who you are in the interaction and me as the observer, as the third party. So if I am a fellow coworker, I can take one approach. If I am a tech lead or a person who is supposed to be in charge of the health of the team and so forth, I will take a different approach. So let's start about with like being a coworker. Now the problem here is that it might be the case that the junior is really weak in their skills, and the problem here is usually that you need to figure out who is the source of the problem, or what rather is the source of the problem, because there are many factors that play into the situation. One part can be that the junior is simply not able to produce at a level that is acceptable. Another one is that the senior is being a complete dick to the junior because the senior does not have the emotional intelligence or the personal maturity to understand that there has to be an expectation that stands in proportion to the skill of the person that you are reviewing, or like in this case the junior. And the third option might be that the issue is that the junior is faced against tasks that are simply way beyond their current skill level, because there's someone hasn't actually taken the time to make sure that you hired the person who has a profile for the work that you're doing. And that is a very key thing that many companies do really poorly, because a completely ignorant company will hire arbitrarily people without really understanding what they need to get done, and then be surprised when there's a mismatch where you have you put a junior on things that are like way more advanced than they would ever be possible to fix by themselves. I've been here myself. I've been hired for, when I was in the start of my career, I've been hired for jobs where they literally put me alone on a project that is like way more advanced than what you would have given any junior software developer. I didn't know that at the time, so I had enormous anxieties and so forth. But I later understood that no sane, like decent IT company does this. It's something that usually only happens when you're dealing with ignorant stakeholders. So these are the situations that usually happen, and if you are the coworker in this interaction, it really comes down to figuring out for yourself, how do you feel about the situation? If the junior is really weak and cannot produce at the skill level that is necessary, then you might take one approach, and if it's the senior that is the issue, you take a different approach. The first thing you should do is to build up a little bit of a history, a recorded history of interactions with the senior and the junior. In other words, like say that you're doing pull requests. If you can see that the senior is being very tough on the junior, you can always do the code review as well and say that, yes, I understand what your point, because usually the senior isn't like bad, like they're usually not tough on people, or they're not going to be completely in the wrong. It's not like they're usually making up stuff. So you can always play the diplomat there and say that, I understand your point, but I also feel that this is an acceptable thing, etc. You kind of try to act as a social buffer a little bit, because the reason why you want to do that is because that checks the senior's behavior. And now you have without confronting the senior, because the problem with confronting people is that you can actually get stabbed in the back due to when you confront people. It depends on the culture. You have now, in a graceful manner, created a situation where the senior has to think about themselves, has to reflect on their behavior. and you did it without having to cause a conflict in anyone. You just got yourself involved, and this is sort of the same principle, like, you know, those domestic disturbances. A lot of drunks, or like people who like hit their wives or husbands or like whatever, right? They're usually much more careful when there's somebody else around, because usually they only get that green-eyed monster that they are, that just comes to light when they feel like there's nobody watching. But when you make it public that you are watching, the behavior actually changes. This is one part, so it might just fix this itself by doing that. The other part that is happening is that you are now creating history where there's 2 against 1. Because if the junior is being mistreated, or the reverse, if the senior is really trying and the junior is just not getting it, you now have 2 people. So when you go to your manager and you want because you can't resolve it for some reason, your manager is going to feel much better about making a decision here, because now it's 2 against 1. And that's at the end of the day, like if it's word against word, the manager, depending on the type of manager, if you have a weak one, they're not going to do anything because they're too scared to make a decision based on, like, they want to feel comfortable. It's sort of like a politician who just will not make a decision unless people tell him or her that, oh yeah, there's a majority here. Because if there's a majority, you can always just point your finger and say, if something goes bad, and say, no, but I just did what everybody else wanted me to do. And that's the perfect situation to put your manager in. Now, if I am a manager, or like I'm the team lead or something like that, the first thing I'm going to look at is this exact thing. I'm going to look at the interactions. So if a junior comes and talks to me about this sort of thing, it's because it might not be that I get to hear it, because unfortunately for juniors, it's very intimidating. I have this problem today. I have a junior software developer that I work with, and doesn't matter how nice I am to him, because he is scared shitless of me. Because he thinks that he's going to get fired if he does something wrong, or if I'm not happy with something that he does, he immediately gets super scared, because now I'm giving him criticism, which is of course a very sensitive subject. And the reality is that there's no way around that. It's just he has to go live through it, just as I had to. And like anybody, you can be as nice as possible, but at the same time you can't be like as the helicopter parents. You can't just be nice all the time. Sometimes you have to tell them that this was not so good, let's do it this way instead. Constructive criticism, if that makes sense. And so when you're in that situation, it's actually much trickier for you to figure out in some cases what's going on. That's why I argue that this good manager or tech lead or whoever has to have a very intimate understanding of the code base and the people working in the team in order to do this effectively. Because now I can make an assessment. I can check, is this true? Is it true that the junior is actually just so bad at coding that we can't keep him in the company? Or is it that the junior is on tasks that are maybe a little bit difficult? Because if that is the case, then I can move the junior I can change the backlog. That's because that is within my power as the tech lead or the person who's controlling the environment, right? I can change the workflow so that the junior gets to do things that are less difficult, and that also puts them in an evaluation situation, or that's very useful for me, because if I know that they're working on things that I would expect a junior to be able to do, and they still have this problem, well, that's a problem, because then we can't keep the junior. And on the other hand, if it's a senior who's mistreating the junior, then there are 2 ways to approach it. Either I separate them, move them to different teams, or you can do the same thing here. You can move around the backlogs so that they never overlap with each other. In other words, if this junior is just working on things that are fairly simple and the senior is only working on things that are fairly complicated, then it becomes less of a problem. They still have, there's still this whole code review thing. So the best thing is, of course, if you can talk to the senior in this regard and just explain to him or her that, you know what, this team is about teamwork. We're about this, because that's also on you as a tech lead. You have to define what are the expectations on people in the group. That's what I always do. I always set up some guidelines for code of conduct in the team, because if you have that, then it's basically it becomes like everybody agrees that yes, you should treat people in a certain way and so forth. If you don't, you're out. And what's very nice about that is that means that you don't have to take a position where you think that you don't have to tell the senior you're gonna have to comply with what I want, or you're out of a job. What you can tell the senior is that you are very clearly not following the agreed upon way of doing things. Why is that? And if you feel that there is a resistance, or like you feel like this person is actually pushy or like has an attitude problem, fire them immediately, get rid of them. You do not, as the tech lead, stand for bad attitude from your developers. You kill any things like that. You kill immediately. I don't care how, and this is on you again. I do not care how important that senior is. If you have put yourself in a position where that person is so important that they can get away with a bad attitude problem, and you are afraid to fire them because they know too much, you fix that immediately. Then you have done a bad job as the tech lead. So what I want you to take away from this is that if you're dealing with a depressed junior who is being treated badly by seniors, you have to figure, first and foremost, depending on who you are, there are two ways usually to solve it. If you are a fellow coworker, start showing your presence in code reviews and in conversations, so that whoever is in the wrong is now aware of, rather that these two people are aware of, that you are there as well, and that you are actually paying attention to this. If it is that the junior is simply too weak in coding, or the senior has a bad attitude, you have now started a process of creating history, so that your manager is going to feel much more comfortable taking decisive action later down, if you can't solve it some other way. If you are the manager, try to figure out if the tasks that are in proportion to what the junior needs in order to progress, because you don't hire a junior to do a mid-level or a senior's job. You should know that. And if it turns out that the junior truly is too weak, even if you move them around to build simpler tasks, then you have to get rid of them. Simple as that. If the senior is the issue, and the senior has an attitude problem or something like that, you make sure that you have a mature enough work process where they have full knowledge of how they are expected to behave in the workplace, and they also have you have the process so that this person is not, it's not the end of the world if they get fired, and then you fire that idiot. Because at the end of the day, software development is usually about a team effort, and as the tech lead, it is your job to make sure that you distribute your resources, your software resources, on tasks that are appropriate for their level, and you also make sure that the health of the entire team and the company is as good as it can be. And that is not possible when you have like a problem, like a bad apple type of senior developer who thinks he or she runs the show. Have a great day.